Just real quick, thank you everyone for all your great presentations and contributions. Excited to get the groundwork going. And now it's my honor to introduce USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service Chief Matt Lohr. He's here today to kick off the summit with a keynote address. And I know several of us have been fortunate to work with NRCS. They're a leader in conservation out there, and just look forward to hearing from the chief. He's a fifth generation Virginia farmer, long established history of environmental stewardship, grew up farming in Virginia, and also has served as a state ag commissioner, also a motivational speaker. So his expertise is broad, and we really appreciate his leadership and commitment to conservation. And he's been serving as the chief of the NRCS since December of 2019. So Chief Lohr, welcome.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Can you hear me okay? I'll try to share my screen here with you guys. Let's see, display settings, resume view. All right, can you all see that?
Yep, it's coming up. You're in that fun speaker mode where we can see your notes and your.
Okay, so we gotta. We got to get this screen over here, Eric. Hold on 1 second here. They're seeing this side instead of this side. Okay, let me see how we can do. Is that better?
Still the same challenge.
Still the same. Okay.
Yeah. Can you use the one that you're in? Could you use that as your notes and the other one? Yep, that works there. That does it.
Is that right now?
Yep, that does it.
All right, very good. Excellent, excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be a part of the Central Grasslands Roadmap Summit. I'm really excited to be able to share with everyone today. I wish that we were in person. I'm a speaker. I love to be on stage and be interacting with the audience, so I still haven't quite figured out how to connect as well when you do it remotely, but nonetheless, we're fortunate to have some technologies like Zoom that we can still be able to have events like this. So thank you, Tammy and Matt, for all of your work and getting me here today and be able to share. I want to start off by congratulating all of the delegates for your involvement in such an important undertaking. As you know, the Central Flyway Zone, I mean, is such an important part of North America, 500 million acres. It's huge. Especially when you bring in Canada and Mexico and the United States in order to put this roadmap together. It's going to take such huge collaboration. And as the chief of NRCS in the last 2 years, I've been so impressed when we look in conservation of really how much collaboration plays such a vital role. One agency or one group just can't do it alone. And when we look at the delegates here making up of our state and federal agencies and our tribes and NGOs, our private landowners, that's very exciting to bring so many different folks to the table in order to work on such an important journey and mission that we're embarking on. So thank you for the chance to share today. Thanks for bringing NRCS into the equation, and how exciting to think that we have the opportunity to truly create the future when we think about the Central Grasslands area and the great work that takes place there. So I have the great fortune, as Tammy said, to serve as chief of the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. I'm not sure how many of you are really familiar with our agency. Been around for about 85 years. We were formed out of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. And the goal that we have across our 3,000 offices and our 10,000 employees is working hand in hand with our farmers, our ranchers, our private forest landowners to provide the technical assistance and the financial assistance to address the resource concerns and help them be the best stewards of the land, help them improve their operations, and help them see the power of conservation and the benefits that it takes over an operation. Congress blesses us with about $4.5 billion each year in Farm Bill programs through EQIP or CSP or ACEP, which is our Conservation Easements Program, or RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We have a lot of dollars that we leverage with our producers and our partners, and I know many of those partners are represented here on the call today, to really help address conservation resource needs all across the country. And of course, conservation is so important when we look at the success of American agriculture. you know, the North American grasslands are so crucial to our communities, to the environment, to agriculture, and we're very fortunate through our agency to have been very involved in the work in this area of programs like our Working Lands for Wildlife, where we work hand in hand with our private landowners to address not only conservation needs, but endangered species or listed species, and how producers can put a plan together where they can still farm and enhance their agricultural operation, but at the same time looking at special attention to habitat, whether it's lesser prairie chicken or sage grouse. I've learned that, you know, it used to be either you farm or you protect habitat, but we are now in a world where we can work together and integrate them hand in hand, and that's been so very important to be a part. So thank you so much for allowing me to be able to be on the agenda today, and thanks for letting NRCS be a part of this equation. Okay, so being able to create a roadmap is going to be so very important as we go forward. And as Tammy said, I'm very fortunate to be a 5th generation farmer from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. On the slide, you'll see a picture of my farming operation began in the 1880s. This is my great-great-grandparents there in the carriage. Those 2 barns you see on each side of the slide are actually still in operation today. We retired the horse and carriage a couple of years ago, but I love this picture because for me it shows the history for our farming operation, but more importantly, it shows that how important a roadmap has been for the success of all 5 of our generations. Every generation before me has had a vision of where they wanted the operation to go. They've created that roadmap, but the thing is they've had to adapt it and they've had to change it over time. And we think about where we are today, you know, with the central grasslands, that's so important to continue to look at changing and where we are today, but where we want to go in the future. And I've learned very much that over these generations, these are some more pictures of our farm. Over the generations, we've adapted to the type of livestock that we've done, the type of poultry, the type of crops. Recently, we've placed conservation easements on our operation. And for me, when I think about why I believe in conservation, it's really not for my generation, but it's for the next generation. This is a picture of my 6 kids and my wife, and I'm not sure.
Chief Lohr, sorry to interrupt. Wondering if, I think we're not getting the slide advance now as you're moving into those photos.
Okay.
If you're on 2 screens, you may need to be advancing both at the same time. Not totally sure on your end.
What can you see right now?
We're on the title slide.
You're still on the title slide. Okay, let me see. Is that better? Can you see it now?
No, we're just on you.
Okay, let me see here.
Sorry about that.
No, thank you. I appreciate you letting me know. I've got pictures I want to show you. So this does not happen when you're on stage in a live audience. So,
I'll tell you what. If you go off of your shared screen, I will bring it up on mine, and I can just advance them for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be great. Let me. Okay. So do I hit new share?
I'll just take over right now.
Okay, please do. Save me from myself, please.
And thanks to your patience and everybody out there for catching on.
Thank you all very much. All right, so let's go back one there, Matt, if you would. So this was the picture from the 1880s. My great-great-grandparents who started the farming operation. And they're the ones that had this initial roadmap of where they wanted our farming operation to go. But of course, it's changed many times over the years. If you advance it one. Some more pictures of our farming operation today. And then finally, the picture of my family with our 6 kids and my wife. We recently placed conservation easements on our farming operation to make sure that our land will be preserved forever. And I'm not sure if I've got a 6th generation farmer in the picture there, but I do know that each of my children have been around agriculture their whole life. They understand the importance of conservation and the power of conservation. And they know that there's been a roadmap that's been put in place for them moving forward. And that's why I think it's so very exciting that you all are taking the time at this event to really develop the roadmap of where you want to go. All right, thank you. So with NRCS, you know, what makes us successful is we do conservation planning. We have a 9-step conservation planning process. And it usually starts with a producer that has some type of a resource concern. And really we work together to put a plan in place. And so what I wanted to do is kind of run through quickly the 9 steps of a conservation plan that we take and how really that parallels with the steps that you're taking to put a roadmap together, because planning is so very, very important. One of the activities I used to do when I did youth trainings is I would have like a 5-foot by 5-foot square that'd be mapped off with some tape, and I would have 30 round paper plates that would be all mixed together, all in different orders. And I would have a group of students come around and they would turn their back to the square. And I would say, when I say go, you're going to turn around and you want to hit the plates in order 1 through 30 as fast as you can, with only one person or one body part being in the middle of the square at a time, and you have to go in order. So I say go, they turn around and they're stumbling through trying to hit these plates, and usually it's like 2 minutes to get through the activity. And I stop and I give them 30 seconds to talk and plan and look at the situation, talk together, put a plan together. Then I let them go again, and usually it goes from like 2 minutes down to a minute. I give them another 30 seconds to plan, and then they usually figure out they got to get down on their knees, and then they start putting this great strategy together. And by the 3rd or 4th time, they've got their time down to like 15 or 20 seconds. And it really shows the importance of having a plan. Anytime you have a plan with whatever activity you're embarking on, the success is going to be there, the results are going to be there, it's going to be done quicker and more efficiently. And I think by you all coming together and putting this master plan together, it's going to be very, very important to see where we go in the future. Thank you, Matt. So very quickly, I'll kind of run through some of these to see, you know, it starts with identifying a problem. Again, for a producer, it's normally a resource concern of erosion, or maybe there's too much water or not enough water, or maybe the water's polluted. For you, you have a huge area, a part of North America that you want to see protected. The Great Plains serves so many great purposes, but obviously it has threats. How can we work together to put a plan in place to maximize the grasslands, the habitat, the water? So very important to help identify what that problem is. Okay. Next is determining the objectives, and your draft vision statement that you all put together really digs into this and takes care of that. As you can see, you know, talking about the flyway zone is abundant grasslands of native plants and communities and viable communities for birds and pollinators, just to name a few. And so I love where you're going with this and being able to how we dig in to know exactly how to make this happen. So inventory resources are very important, and I think the survey you took was able to do some of this to identify what the resources are, but also more importantly to help identify what some of the roadblocks are going to be and what some of the challenges are going to be. And I would just start off by saying that throughout this process that you're embarking on, there's going to be some roadblocks and some challenges as you go through this. And I want to share a quick activity with you to really kind of show that whatever you do, don't let these roadblocks slow you down or derail you, because you have to have determination when you work to put together such a massive plan as this. So I used to do a lot of workshops and speeches for high school students, and one of my favorite activities, I would have these letters of the alphabet, like from A to Z, and I would pass them out to a group of students, and I would give everybody one without them seeing it, and I would say, we're going to give you 5 minutes. When I say go, take the letter you're given, turn it over, and try to form as many words as you can with the letter that you've been given. So if one person has a C and they have an A and they have a T, they form the word cat. Every time your letter is used to form a word, you get a point, and everybody keeps track of their points. We bring everybody back together and we see who formed the most words with the letter they're given, and there's candy, and everybody's all excited, man. They're like, this is the greatest game. Let me have the letter. When I say go, they turn their letter over, and about half of the group jumps up and they start running around the room. They're holding up their letter. But the other half, they kind of pause and they look at their letter and they look at me and they start to complain, because they're like, you gave me a terrible letter. I can't do anything with this Q or this X or this Z. And they start to complain, and then somebody says it's not fair. Now, I've got 6 kids at home, and I'm sure many of you probably have children too. So you know, you hear it's not fair a lot. And I always stop and say, well, you're right, it's not fair, because clearly some letters can form better words and more words than others. But life is kind of the same way. It's not fair because some people in life are given great hands, great letters, and some are born into tragedy and circumstance and handicaps. And so life is not fair. But the point of this is what really determines your success is not the letter that you're given in life, but it's what you do with it. And so I was in Seattle, Washington doing this event for a group of high school students, and we were going around after the activity was over, and a young lady was so excited she found 18 words. And when I asked her what her letter was, she held up the letter Q. And this is probably a little backwards on your screen, but the letter Q like this. And immediately people started complaining, there's no way in the world, there's not even 18 words in the dictionary that have a Q in it. How is that possible? And she said, well, I noticed that when I took the Q, I couldn't do much with it, but when I put my hand just like this, my thumb covered up that little piece in my Q, all of a sudden became the letter O. Another conference, somebody found 16 words with the letter X. Now, this is not really the letter you want, but they discovered they put their thumb right there and turned the X into the letter Y. And then somebody else found 14 words with the letter Z. Again, not the best letter to have, but when they turned it this way, it became the letter N, although a little chubby, still the letter N. I love that activity because it really shows that, you know, life is not the situation you're in, it's not the obstacle you have, it's not the letter you're given, but it's what you do with it. And when we work through this process to take on such a massive challenge, a massive task as this, there's going to be some roadblocks, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be different views and opinions, but you got to have determination and you got to plow through, because that's the way that we're going to be able to come to some type of consensus and some type of success. So hopefully, as we go through this, there'll be plenty of that determination. All right, Matt. So these three I'm going to summarize very quickly. You know, we've got to analyze our resource data, and you know, the practical reality of grassland conservation of the Great Plains is that we need agriculture to sustain, enhance, and restore. So there's going to be, you got to analyze that resource data and formulate alternatives. How do we change the mindsets or the perceptions about conservation and agriculture, about something as fundamental as food production? That's so very important, but how do we change the mindsets of food production and conservation and habitat really can go hand in hand? Agriculture is not the enemy, food production is not the enemy, but there has to be a way we can all work together. And finally, to be able to evaluate those various alternatives that you're going to put together is going to be very important. Okay? And then finally, we've got to make some decisions, and there's going to be some tough decisions with so many stakeholders. It really is going to come down to compromise, where everybody's got to learn to be able to give a little bit. I know about 20 years ago, when I was pretty young into my farming career, my wife and I were really getting on the agritourism bandwagon. We wanted to do you-pick pumpkins and corn mazes and bring thousands of people to the farm. It was a pretty traditional farming operation. My parents were very traditional. And when we approached this idea with them, we farmed together, they wanted none of it. They thought it was, I mean, especially I remember my dad saying, why would somebody pay money to walk through a cornfield? This was 20 years ago. And they really were opposed to any of us being able to look at some of these options. We wanted to provide our own roadmap for the future, but it was very different than the roadmap that they had put together. So it took some compromise. We wanted this huge, large operation. They wanted none of it. So we started with 1 acre of pumpkins and a small play area with hay rides, took it very, very small. And that first year, it was extremely successful. So the next year, we went to 3 acres of pumpkins, and we put a very small corn maze in, about 1 acre, and that was successful. By the third year, my dad was asking us when we were going to really expand this operation and put in like a full-blown 10-acre corn maze. And I have to say that over the years, some years we had 20,000 people that would come to our farm to bring their families and pick their pumpkins and spend the day learning. But it was a compromise in the beginning where we all had to come together to form our opinions, and we all gave a little bit, we all got a little bit, and then as we worked forward, we were able to make those tough decisions and then implement that plan going forward. So implementing the plan is so very, very important. You got to take action. So when this process is done and you have this roadmap together, sometimes you see these groups come together, they put these great plans together and they just put it on the shelf and they don't actually work to implement it. You got to be able to take action. We're not going to have results by just putting a plan together. We have to actually roll up our sleeves and implement. And then more importantly, we have to evaluate, because times will change. We'll see things that work, things that don't work. It's a big part about NRCS, as we are always involved in new types of conservation, reevaluating our practices because things evolve. You have to be able to continue evaluating where you go in order to be successful. So this is kind of, I love this picture because this kind of gives a summary of all of the things that you're all looking for in your roadmap. You know, the top right-hand corner, you see grassland. This is what our grassland should look like with our native plants. We see clean water and wildlife and pollinator habitats in the bottom right-hand corner. The bottom left, you know, food production. You know, we can have wildlife and pollinators, and that's very, very important, but we have to make sure that, you know, we have a world to feed. We have to make sure that agriculture production has got to be a part of the equation. And this kind of summarizes just a snapshot of how all of these different components that you've identified in your draft vision statement, how they can work together and how they can continue to bring all of these components together as we go forward down the road. The last thing I'll share with you, this is a big challenge, a big task ahead of us. Some of you and some people, when they hear what's taking place, are probably going to say, well, it's not possible. There's no way in the world you can bring this many stakeholders together, you can bring this many participants together to create this roadmap to satisfy such a wide-ranging audience. But you can if you can really envision the impossible. I'll wrap up with one of my favorite stories. It's about a man named Roger Bannister. Now, Roger Bannister was the first person in history to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Now, today it's quite common. It happens quite frequently. But in the 1870s, when they first started racing, it was thought to be impossible. There were thousands and thousands of runners all over the world were all trying to be the first person to run that mile in under 4 minutes. And for 75 years, it went unfulfilled until spring of 1954 in Oxford, England. A young man by the name of Roger Bannister became the first person in history to run a mile in under 4 minutes. It was such a big deal. His picture ended up on the front page of every newspaper around the world. I mean, this was something that doctors said that a human heart would explode in one's chest before someone could run a mile in under 4 minutes. It was so thought to be impossible. So it was such a big deal when it finally happened. When I was in college years ago, I did a research paper on Roger Bannister. I was fascinated in this process and this story. They went on to make a movie of him. He became a successful doctor. And I did some studies, and I was interested that it took 75 years before the first person in the world could run a mile in under 4 minutes. And I was fascinated and curious to see how long it took before the second person could run a 4-minute mile. And I was amazed to learn that it only took 49 days before it happened again. In fact, throughout the rest of the year in 1954, there were 7 other runners that all ran a 4-minute mile in 1954 alone, and 3 of them even did it during the same single race. So what could have changed where it took 75 years before it happened the first time, and it just took 7 weeks before it happened the second time? Well, the only thing that changed was up here, right? For all those years, it was thought to be impossible. But when Roger Bannister did it for the first time and people could see that it could happen, nobody died, nobody's heart exploded, then they began to see it, and then they began to believe it. And when their mind began to believe it, their bodies began to respond accordingly. And today there have been over 3,000 runners around the world that have all run a 4-minute mile. What you're embarking on is very similar, because there will be some that say this is impossible. There's no way we can put this roadmap together. But I challenge you to be creative, think outside the box, look at ideas and programs and approaches that have never been thought of before. And instead of just chalking it up as being, well, there's no way that could happen, really dig in and ask the hard questions. Why not? Can we make this happen? Can we collaborate together? What are the resources? What are the tools? What do we need in order to make this roadmap a success? And if we can have that same vision and realize that if we're not limited, if we're not going to let the obstacles get in front of our way, we're diligent and working together on this plan, we understand the importance of compromise, we come up with a plan and we implement it and we reevaluate it, then I know that there's going to be some great things to occur in the next 10 years as we continue working together. So thank you for the chance to be a part of the team. Thanks for the chance to share with you today, and thanks for letting NRCS and everything we do at USDA to help you in creating this great undertaking. Thank you very much.